Greetings and salutations, fellow book readers. This is Mark, and the book I'll review today is Life with Picasso. Before we continue, this is personalized limited edition of Life with Picasso with leather cover designed and made by me. At the end of the video, I will tell you a couple of ways of how you can get one for yourself if you are interested. Now let's get back to the review. Life with Picasso is a memoir by Françoise Gilot about the decade she spent with the famous painter Pablo Picasso. She was in her early 20s when they met, and he already passed 60. They started a long affair, which made her somewhat of an unofficial wife of Picasso. At that time, Picasso was married to his first wife, Olga Kokoklova, until her death in the 1950s, because he didn't agree to the divorce settlement to divide his property with her. It probably also gave him a good excuse not to have to marry any of the following three women he had a relationship with, including Gilot. After Olga's death, he did marry his last partner, Jacqueline Roch, and after his death, she is the one who got a big chunk of his estate, since he did not leave any will. But it seems for her the money did not make up for her loss, and she committed suicide some years later. Gilot's life seems to have been overshadowed by her relationship with Picasso, but she was an intelligent woman and an accomplished artist in her own right. She came from upper middle class and was well educated, Sorbonne and Cambridge, pushed by her practical father to become a lawyer, but she always wanted to be a painter like her mother, and that was probably the motivation behind her attraction to Picasso. After Picasso, she married 2 times, including the famous scientist Jonas Salk, who invented the polio vaccine, and professionally she was a good painter and writer, but I think she is most remembered for her relationship with Picasso as the only woman who left him. What is Life with Picasso about? In general, it is about a relationship with eccentric genius and the hidden price one has to pay for it, and specifically an intimate look at Picasso, not only an artist but also a man, perhaps not ordinary, but nevertheless a human being. Pablo always saw himself as a river sweeping everything before it. That was his nature, and he must obey it. A bit of the plot. It starts with 21-year-old Gilot meeting Picasso in a Parisian restaurant. At the beginning, it is a friendship based on common interests, but quickly it becomes romantic, and eventually, under pressure from Picasso and against the will of her family, she moves in with him. The whole relationship seems friendship with benefits. Picasso teaches her about painting and art in general, techniques and theory, and his life philosophy, and she is his assistant, a sidekick, taking care of mundane and the boring aspects of Picasso's life, following a strict schedule made and enforced by Picasso. And he also gave her 2 kids, probably to make sure she sticks around. And she did, probably for much longer than otherwise. But eventually it all piled up and reached the tipping point, and that's when she had to make a difficult decision. She tried to negotiate, but Picasso was not very collaborative, and in a certain way it was him who chose for her. And also she probably was just tired of the old grumpy man. He went into a fit of anger and threatened to commit suicide. I told him I didn't believe he would, but that if it would make him happier, I wouldn't attempt to stop him. And that's the basic plot. What are my thoughts about Life with Picasso? It was a very good read, especially if you are interested in art and Picasso. It exposes him, shows him under his art cloak, somewhat of a naked, defenseless human being, an old child, the image he liked to keep from the public, and that would explain the panic and aggressive but unsuccessful efforts from Picasso and his friends to stop the book from being published. Gilot paints Picasso as a tyrant, self-absorbed and self-centered, even sadistic. He said to me, "Nobody has any real importance to me. As far as I am concerned, other people are like those little grains of dust floating in the sunlight. It takes only a push of the broom and out they go. Picasso was a man with huge ego who compared his work to the one created by God. Also paranoid, he didn't trust banks and kept all the money at home, hidden in boxes. When he died, the equivalent of over $3 million in cash and over $1 million in gold was found in his house. Picasso would go through periods of depression, wondering why he should even get out of bed, since life in general was meaningless. All the drama because he liked for people to tell him how great he was, and so Gilot could console him. For hours at the time, telling him how great his life was and how much his friends loved him, until she was physically and psychologically exhausted. Picasso was pretty high maintenance, a prima donna, as most people who need the attention of others are, but she also described Picasso as a very talented and hardworking when working. Gilot probably knew Picasso better than anybody else, between the people who got over their fear and were willing to talk about him publicly. But it is her story, and I wonder how Picasso would have told it. After the end of the relationship, many people took his side. Maybe they saw the relationship from a different angle. A young, ambitious girl takes advantage of an older, famous man, and once there isn't much more to gain, she leaves. A pretty common story. Also, I wonder why she wrote the book in English. Maybe it was for the people who didn't have much knowledge of the affair between the two and haven't formed their opinion, so she could gain some allies and sympathy. Somebody said that Picasso took more from her than she from him, but that's pretty subjective. What she received from Picasso could be considered priceless and difficult to put value on. He told me that from now on, everything I did and everything he did was of the utmost importance. Any word spoken, the slightest gesture, would take on a meaning, and everything that happened between us would change us continually. Gilot herself admitted that the relationship for her was not sentimental. When she met Picasso, she was an aspiring young painter, and at that time there was nobody who could offer her more. So maybe she decided to stay with him to learn as much as she could. Picasso probably could sense it, that's why he was insecure about the relationship. It was kind of a relationship that obviously had an expiration date. Contrary to the other women in his life, who worshipped Picasso, the man, not what he could do for them. Picasso was surrounded by many interesting people when Gilot met him, not only painters, but also writers and philosophers, Jean-Paul Sartre, Albert Camus, etc. She met Picasso during the German occupation. It took a lot of courage for him to stay in Paris after the Huns arrived. He was openly anti-Franco and did a series of sketches critical of the dictator titled The Dream and Lie of Franco. Some people who were against Franco were either deported back to Spain and executed or sent to the concentration camp. But perhaps Hitler felt some admiration for Picasso, being an aspiring but failed painter himself, and maybe Picasso could feel it. Many Germans would visit him, interested in buying his paintings. I remember a story of one such time when a German officer looked at the painting of Guernica, painted after the Germans brutally bombed the town, and asked, "You did this?" And Picasso answered, "No, you did this." Gilot said if it wasn't for the war, she would never have gotten involved with him. The trauma of the destruction, people she knew her age dying, and there was Picasso, incredibly alive, offering her an entrance into a different, seemingly safer and happier world. Perhaps for Gilot and others, Picasso offered a bit of symbolic hope. After the war, he became more vocal about his opinions and political beliefs, joined the Communist Party, which included a trip to socialist Poland for some type of leftist peace conference. After it, Picasso, who was only to spend a couple of days but stayed 2 weeks, supposedly said that it was the best 2 weeks of his life. It is said that at this time he also drew a white dove, which became the international symbol of peace. In this aspect, Picasso was, like so many artists, totally naive about politics. even hypocritical, enjoying the spoils of capitalism but preaching the superiority of communism. Gilot describes the relationships Picasso had with other people. There was Matisse, the complex link between them, very competitive, but also there was mutual respect and recognition of each other's talent. That's why I like Matisse. Matisse is always able to make an intellectual choice about colors. Whether it's close to nature or far away, he's always able to fill an area completely with one color, simply because it goes with the other colors on the canvas, and not because of being more or less sensitive to reality. Supposedly, it was Matisse, his work, that drove Picasso to better his own painting, not to be outdone. The relationship became less competitive and more relaxed after Matisse had a close call with death and became more generous and spiritual, saw every day as a gift to be enjoyed. Actually, that's when Picasso started to see Matisse as a friend, because according to Gilot, Picasso always took and his friends always gave. Upon liberation of Paris, Hemingway, who was a war correspondent, stopped by, and when asked if he brought any gifts, he left a case of grenades with a note for Picasso. Picasso took Gilot to see Gertrude Stein in her apartment full of Picasso's paintings, and Stein, who was a lesbian, found Gilot pretty attractive and wondered what kind of relationship she had with Picasso. Picasso respected Stein and said that if she approves of Gilot, she will gain in his eyes as well. There was Picasso's lifelong friendship and working relationship with Georges Braque, with whom he found Cubism. There was a lot of tension brought by jealousy, more from Picasso. When Braque invited Picasso, he made sure he would not invite Picasso's friends, to spare his ego, not to imply he had an outside relationship with people Picasso considered his friends. The Catalan painter Jean Miró would visit Picasso. He and Salvador Dali were Picasso's connection to Barcelona, where he learned and perfected his painting technique. And Marc Chagall, with whom Picasso ended friendship, because Chagall came to see him with a very skinny woman, and it put Picasso in a bad mood. Picasso, being Spanish, preferred the rounder, more voluptuous bodies, and he made sure Gilot knew it, since she herself was rather thin. "You were a Venus when I met you," he said. "Now you're a Christ, and a Romanesque Christ at that, with all the ribs sticking out to be counted. I hope you realize you don't interest me like that." That's why he was nicest to her when she was pregnant and filled up a bit. But Picasso always respected Chagall as a painter and said after Matisse dies, the only real painter left will be Chagall. Picasso also admired Charlie Chaplin, his roles of solitary man, with which he could identify, anybody being a self-performer like a matador fighting a bull. As Chaplin was growing older and losing his humor, Picasso saw a reflection of himself in it, becoming less with age. They met once, but since one could not speak English and the other French, the meeting was somewhat superficial. There was also Picasso's relationship with the art dealers. It was business mixed with friendship. He was a tough negotiator, but loyal. When the new American dealer came to Paris to buy some paintings from him, Picasso would use that as a leverage to renegotiate the prices with his regular dealer. Occasionally he would paint something for the American, but would send him to buy it from his dealer. I think Picasso had great business instincts. He was a natural salesman, and that's why he had so much financial success during his life, which was not that common. Most painters usually sell their paintings, if they sell them at all, for a low price. The huge amounts are paid to the galleries and collectors, usually after the painter's death. And there were the relationships with the people who worked for him, his somewhat eccentric driver, Marcel, his almost blind secretary, who would stare uncomfortably at others because he couldn't see them well, and there were others. And there were the women in Picasso's life. Outside Gilot, it seems Dora Maar had most influence on him. They never married, nor had any children, and their relationship was pretty intellectual. She probably challenged him the most and was the most complex woman he knew. Picasso was still spending time with Dora Maar while together with Gilot, but it was pretty platonic, according to Picasso. There was also his first wife and mother to his eldest child, the Russian ballet dancer Olga Kokoklova. She never really got over being left by Picasso, and after finding out that Dora Maar has been replaced by Gilot, she persistently followed her around and made sure Gilot knew who the real Mrs. Picasso was, accusing Gilot of stealing her husband and trying to force her way into their apartment. Olga would come up behind me and start to pinch, scratch, and pull, and finally squeeze into the house before me, saying, "This is my house, my husband lives here," and pushing at me so that I couldn't go in. Actually, she stayed legally married to Picasso until her death in 1955, which was after Gilot left. Further, there was the 17-year-old girl, Marie-Therese, who became his lover and mother of his daughter. Maybe Picasso considered the relationship with her most pure and innocent, since when she met him she had no idea who he was, and the affair was very quiet, homely, away from the public, kept as a secret from Olga for many years. Surprisingly, Picasso had pretty civilized relationship with his exes, not Gilot, probably because it was her who left him, and he could never forgive her. In the film adaptation Surviving Picasso, Dora Maar says that after Picasso there is nothing, only God. And it seems that's how the others felt. A couple committed suicide after his death. Again, not Gilot, who proved there was a pretty good life after Picasso. In general, Picasso enjoyed the company of women, being surrounded by them in real life and his paintings. There is a story, maybe not true, of Dora Maar and Marie-Therese physically fighting over him, and he watching, enjoying the show. If I had had to move every time women started fighting over me, I wouldn't have had time for much else in my life. I told him I had no interest in fighting with anybody over him. Picasso would pursue women he was interested in and then become tired of them and look for something new. He famously stated, "There are only two kinds of women, goddesses and doormats." He had and enjoyed many adventures with the opposite sex, serious and casual. Maybe it was his Spanish DNA. Pablo's definition of a perfect Sunday, according to Spanish standards, was mass in the morning, bullfight in the afternoon, whorehouse in the evening. I think Picasso liked many women around him because one was not able to fill all his needs. He was just too complex and too demanding, and they all came second to his art. Gilot also writes about Picasso, the artist, his techniques and philosophy. We mustn't be afraid of inventing anything. Everything there is in us exists in nature. After all, we are part of nature. If it resembles nature, that's fine. If it doesn't, what of it? When man wanted to invent something as useful as the human foot, he invented the wheel, which he used to transport himself and his burdens. The fact that the wheel doesn't have the slightest resemblance to the human foot is hardly a criticism of it. His paintings might seem chaotic, especially the later ones, but they were well thought out. Everything had its reason and purpose as the part of the whole. While teaching Gilot painting, Picasso would disclose a lot of his inspirations and philosophy about life and how it applied to his art. At times he was pretty poetic about it. He liked to go against normal because nature was not normal or nicely organized or symmetrical, but rather chaotic. The important part of the book is the impact Picasso had on Gilot. I saw the 1998 interview with her, some 25 years after Picasso's death. I could sense a lot of resentment hurt when she was talking about him. He did totally cut contact with her, and so did the people who knew them both. There are two sides to every story, and the truth is somewhere in between. I think she plays a bit of a victim in the book. In the interview, she seems to be trying to diminish Picasso as an artist and his influence over her life. She said she would have been better off professionally if she didn't get involved with him. The interviewer sensed it also, and in the end he said that they were very similar. There was a lot of pride, and both of them seemed pretty stubborn. She co-wrote the book, so she had some professional advice how to structure it to have the most impact. Maybe it was also her revenge for being cut off professionally and socially, even though she always denied it. To sum it up, Life with Picasso is a book that can be enjoyed not only by the fans of Picasso, but also people interested in art and creativity in general. Some people are dismissive of Picasso's talent when seeing his later work, but he was an excellent painter. You can see it in his earlier work. After he became famous, people were buying his paintings not so much for their quality, but because it was Picasso. So he obliged and started to do more of quantity than quality. I think this is true for most artists after they become famous. They focus on making money. All Dali's work from the 70s and 80s is basically mass production, where some paintings were done by his pupils and signed by him. There is a pretty good adaptation of Life with Picasso, starring the great Anthony Hopkins in the title role. I thought he did an excellent job portraying the painter. I don't know why the credits state the script is based on Arianna Huffington's book, Picasso, Creator and Destroyer. The film, in many parts, is verbatim to Life with Picasso. Anyway, I think it is a very good visual addition to the reading. Okay, let's talk about the physical book. The book I am holding is a paperback, which I transformed into a hardcover leather-bound edition. To make the cover, I use grade A naturally tan hide I buy from a tanner in North Spain. It is the same leather Louis Vuitton uses to make his bags, so it is top quality. I do all the processing of the leather myself. First, I designed the cover, and for this I used a painting made by Gilot, a self-portrait sitting in a chair, perhaps remembering and reflecting on her life with Picasso. This is the back with the blurb, and inside front cover I printed a quote from the book. If you want to see a more detailed video where I explain how I transform paperback into leather-bound hardcover, click on the link in the description. I will make a maximum of 100 editions of each title. Each one will be numbered and initialed, and the numbers will go in chronological order from 2 up, since number 1 stays with me. The price will be around $100, so if you would like me to make one for you, you can click below on my email and send me a message. I do not guarantee I will do it, since it will depend on the time I have available, access to leather, and if I can get my hands on the copy of the book. Now, if you're not willing to spend $100, but you still want the book, what you can do is click below on the PayPal link and donate $3 or more to my channel, and for every 100 donations, I will make a lottery and draw one name, and the winner will receive the book. So if you are cheap but feel lucky, this might be the way to do it. Also, your donations give me the extra motivation to make the book reviews, and I appreciate them very much, so thank you in advance. One more thing, when you make your donation, remember to include the title of the book you would like to win. The book itself is beautiful. Visually, it has a very nice texture, it smells great, and the more you handle it, the more beautiful it will become. And it makes a great gift for yourself or somebody who appreciates books. So if you want one, don't snooze or you might lose. Well, that's it, so let's end it here. And until next time, keep your ear close to the ground and read a book. Adios.